Recently, I sent an email to almost 100,000 people on my email list and challenged them to complete a journaling exercise with me. If you want to participate in future exercises, click on the link in the description box to join my email list. In that email, I asked people what were the top 2 challenges in their lives right now. I asked them what they felt were the root causes of those challenges and also how they had been trying to solve these issues. And I was blown away by the responses. Email after email talked about things that people were struggling with the most, and I spotted something quickly. There was one struggle that kept repeating itself over and over again in the responses I got. People felt stuck in their lives. Maybe you're one of the people that emailed me with this challenge, and in this video, you'll learn where people feel most stuck in their lives, the 3 reasons why spiritual people feel stuck, and how to get out of this feeling and move forward with your life. When I looked at the areas in which people felt the most stuck, the top one was feeling stuck in a job. People dreamed of working in a job with meaning or in a career with deep purpose, but they felt like they couldn't make that change. One person said,
"I've been stuck in a job that drains me, something that never felt aligned with who I am."
In close second came the feeling of being directionless in life. Even after their spiritual awakening, people still didn't know what steps to take next, and that uncertainty created a paralysis that made them feel stuck. One person said,
"Feeling stuck, confused, and overwhelmed, anxious about what to do, where to go."
And the third area of stuckness was in relationships. Most people in this category felt either stuck in an unfulfilling relationship that they were not leaving, or stuck in some sort of relational pattern that was destroying them. One person said,
"I'm stuck in a pattern of attracting the same type of traumatized men."
What was interesting about this one is that most people that were stuck in relational patterns could see them clearly, but they still felt powerless to change them. Before we move forward, there's one important thing to remember. You're never really stuck. You're not actually locked away in a cage without the key. What you are feeling is the sensation of being stuck, and that can sometimes feel almost like being in a prison with no key. If you're feeling this sensation of being trapped in your life, you're probably also feeling things like overwhelm, anxiety, and isolation, which are all common experiences when you go through a spiritual awakening. I created my course Awaken to help you move through these painful states and achieve clarity, calm, and a grounded energy in just 6 weeks. Because when you feel clear and grounded, your spiritual awakening becomes much easier to navigate. Click on the link in the description box below to learn more about Awaken and join us. The sensation of stuckness can fall into 3 buckets, and knowing which one you're in will make all the difference when it comes to moving out of this stagnant energy. The first one is that you're feeling stuck because you are outgrowing your current life, meaning that your life can no longer support your growing self. And this reminds me of my favorite creature when it comes to growth, the lobster. There always comes a time in a lobster's life when it begins to feel uncomfortable outside its shell because its inner body is growing and the fixed outer shell is too hard to support it. When this happens, the lobster feels a strong call to go under a rock because it knows that something important has to happen for it to keep growing. Its old shell has to come off. This is what's known as molting. So it goes under a rock and slowly but surely it starts to press against the shell until eventually it cracks. Once free, the lobster is extremely vulnerable because its new shell is soft, and that's why it hides under a rock for a while. By the time the new shell hardens, the lobster is much bigger than it was before, and then it comes out from under the rock and it lives its best life, returning to the rock to molt many, many times across its life. For us humans though, things are sometimes a little harder because our egos often fight the molting process. So many times we fight against the inner call to change our lives, and we can also resist making changes even when our lives become unbearable. So you may feel stuck right now in your life, and it's because you may not be accepting nature's call to molt. Imagine if a lobster did that. It would most certainly die, suffocated by its small outer shell that no longer fits its growing body. And this type of stuckness can actually feel like death to us because it goes against the nature call of the soul to constantly expand and grow. So maybe you feel stuck in a relationship that has long died, or perhaps you feel stuck in a job or a career that no longer fulfills you. It's that you are changing and growing, but the environment around you is not. So your only solution is to break free from the outer situations that are now constraining you. Then comes the second type of stuckness, and this is when you feel stuck because you're off path. Now, this one is a little controversial because some teachers will say that you're never really off path, that no matter where you step in life or what path you take, it's all a part of your overall destiny. And I agree with this statement a little bit. When I say you may be off path, it's taking into consideration your soul self and your human self. Your human self has a lot of leeway and choice when living on Earth, but your soul self ultimately has more power and a broader vision of what your destiny is than the human self does. Your soul does have a plan for your life set way before you were born. It's what I call your higher timeline. This is the preferred and designed path of the soul for this specific lifetime. But then we incarnate and we forget the soul self for a while and live our lives according to our egos and our minds. This veil of forgetfulness is a feature of this realm of existence, and the soul knew this forgetfulness would happen, and it still participates in this life with a lot of excitement. So it will let the human self go down whatever path it wants for a while. Then, when we have a spiritual awakening, the connection between the soul self and the human self reestablishes again, and the human body becomes more in tune with the higher plan. When this happens, your life will change completely. And something funny happens. Your human self loses its free will. This is another controversial statement to make, but this has been confirmed in my own life and in working with thousands of people. We all tell the same story. Before our awakening, it felt like we could do whatever we wanted and go down whatever road without any consequences. But then after our awakening, anytime we tried to go off path that was away from what our soul wanted, we would have some sort of resistance or obstacle appear in our road. Like the soul was saying, you're not doing that. On the one hand, this can feel like you're losing free will, but on the other, it's more like this. You're now living according to the will of your soul. And isn't that great? It means that we now have a very high chance of living our highest path. So sometimes when you feel stuck in life, it could be because you're walking off the path that your soul set out for you, and the soul is giving you a clear signal to stop and assess. That inner discomfort that you call being stuck may actually be your soul creating a drag effect in your life. For example, have you ever seen an athlete train with what's known as a running parachute? They run while this mini parachute follows them, creating resistance or drag as they run. The more the runner pushes, the more the parachute opens up, creating more drag and making the running extremely challenging. That's what your soul does to you when you're off path. Your life starts to get very difficult and challenging. So many people have told me that they know exactly when this happens because their life becomes unbearable and they could feel it's because they're stubbornly off path. So the more off path you go after a spiritual awakening, the more stuck you will feel. The third type of stuckness is when you're in a spiritual awakening phase known as the void. The void is one of 6 stages of spiritual awakening that usually comes right after another one that's known as the dark night of the soul. But this isn't always the case. The void is the stage that I like to call the Great Reset because it usually happens after we've gone through a ton of healing and changes in our lives from our awakening. Then, when we get to the void, it feels like everything stops and we get to breathe again after very hard cycles of healing and transformation. When you're in the void, it feels like everything goes quiet, and many people even experience a loss of spiritual guidance from the universe. Before they go into the void, they can experience synchronicities, signs, and messages from the guides and from the universe, but then suddenly inside the void, even that can disappear. It feels like all the doors close in on you and there's a stillness and a silence in the air. I love to use the metaphor of the chrysalis for the void because that's what it often feels like, that you're encased in this structure with no ability to get out. But that's only if you're not paying attention to the underlying purpose of the void. The void is designed to encourage you to go within yourself, and you can only do that when everything outside goes quiet, even the messages from your guides. The void is extremely important for you to learn how to listen to yourself, to that powerful inner voice that is always trying to guide you. So it's a time of temporary pause where nothing significant happens, but that doesn't mean you're stuck. It's more like you're on vacation. When I look at these 3 types of stuckness, 2 of them are negative and 1 is positive. There's nothing inherently wrong when you're in the void, even if you have the sensation of being stuck. But there are issues when you are in bucket 1 and 2. And that takes us to the root cause of why we resist changing our lives when we outgrow them, or why we go off path sometimes. And it's because of trauma. At the end of the day, we do have to ask ourselves this question: Why am I in bucket 1 or 2 to begin with? Why am I resisting changing my life when I know deep down that I'm outgrowing it? Why am I stubbornly walking off path when I know deep down that there's a better path for me? It's often because of trauma. When we experience any type of trauma, especially in early life, it can create a body and mind that's resistant to the transformation of a spiritual awakening. And why? Because transformation requires constant change and stepping into the unknown. And when you have trauma, your body can get stuck in a protective hold, resisting anything that is new or uncertain. So even if you fall into bucket 1 or 2, be compassionate with yourself, because your resistance to change is likely coming from the body that is trying to protect you from pain. Okay, now that we know the 3 types or buckets of stuckness, what do you do when you feel stuck in life? First, you're going to decipher which bucket you fall into. That's why we talked about them in such detail. When you know which bucket you fall into, that will inform your next decisions and steps to take. And the way I love doing this is by using the power of my inner knowing located in my body. The more you learn to communicate with your intuition in your body, the more easily your life will be on all fronts, not just when you feel stuck. And a good place to start with this communication is by asking simple yes or no questions. Here's how this goes. Sit quietly with your eyes closed and no distractions. Take a few deep, long breaths until you feel your body relax and become quiet. Stay like this for a few minutes and then ask yourself, am I feeling stuck because I'm outgrowing my life? Sit with this question for a few minutes in silence, letting your body communicate through sensations and feelings. Then take a few more deep breaths and ask yourself, am I feeling stuck because I'm off path? Sit with this question for a few minutes and tune into your body sensations. Then take a few more deep breaths and ask this last question. Am I feeling stuck because I'm in the void? Sit in silence and again feel the sensations of your body. Now, I'm giving you this exercise just in case you really have no idea which bucket of stuckness you're in. But in reality, most of us already know. During my in-person retreats, I often ask people why they feel stuck, and they know the answer to this question intuitively without much prompting. The inner knowing is often there even when we resist it. Once you know what bucket you're in, it's now time to go deeper. I like to use a journal for this one. Ask why and what questions. Why am I in this bucket? Why am I trying to stay small when I have outgrown my current life? Why have I veered off path when I know where my soul wants to go? When you go into what questions, I found that they mostly revolve around this one central theme. What are my internal fears in life? Because here's the deal. Feeling stuck often means that I have deep internal fears that I'm not conscious of, so they just run rampant inside of me. Maybe I'm afraid of deciding or taking action to make changes in my life because there's a fear of uncertainty, and I feel safer in the familiarity of my current life. Maybe I'm afraid of temporarily being vulnerable and doing something new without knowing if it's going to work out. Or maybe I'm afraid of standing out and being seen, so I keep myself small and try not to make waves. There are so many internal fears that we can have when we feel stuck in life, but it's paramount that we ask these questions so we can uncover the hidden obstacles that keep us feeling stuck. Once we uncover all this with our journal questions and we come face to face with our insecurities and our fears, that clarity and discernment leads to something else. We then take action. No matter how much inner work we do, eventually it's time to act. At some point in our lives, we have to take a step somewhere or make changes to our lives that our souls are calling us to make. We can't just sit and look within. That's a crucial first step, and it's when we learn with our feminine energy to connect with our intuition and our body's intelligence. But once that feminine energy gives us clarity and discernment, now it's time to use the internal masculine energy of action to make things happen in our outer world. Here's a pro tip if taking action feels overwhelming to you sometimes. Start with baby steps. This is a great way to train your body and nervous system to not go into blocked or resistant mode, because when you take small steps, it feels less overwhelming to your protective systems trying to keep you safe. So if you want to change your job, for example, start by updating your resume or sending out your resume for a few feelers. If you're in an unfulfilling relationship, maybe start by having an honest conversation with your partner about what you're feeling. If you feel directionless, start by focusing on the things that interest you and follow those. Maybe you love photography, so you take a quick course just to get to know it better, even if you don't know what to do with that skill yet. Small actions can add up, and they can give you the confidence to then take bigger steps and make more profound changes that your soul is looking for. And speaking of feeling overwhelmed or like your nervous system is on overdrive, check out this video next, where you'll learn about this powerful spiritual hack that I'm using to keep my nervous system more balanced, even when the world feels insane.